Just before we move into the speak, can I just very briefly just talk about, there's a number of motions in this section that are contradictory, and we've had discussions with the steering committee, and basically motions 62 to 68 are dealing with issues such as hare coursing, etc. And the general summary is as follows. Now, I'll go through it again when we get to the end. But if motion 62 passes, then motions 63 to 68 inclusive will fall. If 62 fails, then there are a series of motions, some supporting hare coursing, some for banning hare coursing. If any one of the ones supporting hare coursing passes, the other ones fall. If anyone supporting banning hare coursing, then the others will fall. So we'll take it as we go through. It's just a little bit complicated because they are contradictory. So before we start this section, can I just call on Matt Carty, please, to address the hall.
Motion 62 from the Ard Comhairle is the result of a substantial and lengthy engagement with our party membership. It reflects the need for robust regulations and strong welfare protections of all activities that involve animals. It also acknowledges that the best people to define those regulations are the experts, and commits Sinn Féin to establishing a commitment of experts to guide our approach on these issues in government. It is the sensible approach that will actually ensure that we succeed where Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and the Green Party have failed miserably. So I urge you all to adopt the Ard Comhairle motion number 62 and then go back into your communities, providing the strong representation by working for a fair level of services for rural area, for fairer prices for the premium prices product that our farmers produce, and a fair chance for our young people. Arylin Lacaila, Goramila Maiag of Cllr.
I'm calling for speakers for this section. Can I ask delegates, please, to identify themselves, their common Coricant or Coiga they are representing, and please remind people you have 2 minutes. We want to get as many speakers in this section as possible. And finally, just before we start, can I remind all delegates that the Ard Comhairle ballot boxes are located in the catering area. Delegates are asked to cast their vote as soon as possible. Ballots will close at 3 o'clock tomorrow. Lanaré,
Gurmagat. Councillor David Dunne, Tipperary County Council, representing McGrath and Sinn Fein Common Carrick-on-Shore. I'm here to speak in support of motion 62, 64, 66 and against motions 63 and 67. Accordia, elements within the media and some of our political opponents claim shadowy figures run Sinn Féin. I want to be 100% clear to them. We, the members here tonight, at this Ardesh, are the ones that set policy and to elect the people to run our party, not anybody else. We are a grassroots-led party. On the motion before us tonight, I'm asking delegates to support the 3 motions I have mentioned. My belief, and hopefully that of you, the delegates, is that the best approach to allow country pursuits such as horse racing, hunting, coursing, fishing, greyhound racing to be participated is in a regulated fashion. I oppose any attempt to impose a ban on these sports against the wishes of rural communities of which I am an elected representative. A ban will achieve nothing but to drive it underground. Gormila Magat.
Johnny Mythen TD for County Wexfprd, speaking in favour of motion 62. Comrades, we must get real here. I understand the sentiment and the general good intentions of counter motions, but I don't think there's much understanding of rural life in them. Rural communities, as we know, have been the backbone of our Irish ways for years. They have preserved and maintained our traditions and the unique characteristics of our nation, whether through music, sport, hunting, fishing, shooting, dog racing and hare coursing. Almost every village in Ireland has some connection to these pursuits, and they have the right to maintain them. They all have a direct influence on preserving our health and mental health. We claim in the proclamation a guarantee of civil liberties, equal rights and equal opportunities. This premise rings loudly across the world and indeed are recorded in many other constitutions. The right to liberty and the pursuit of happiness are inalienable rights. Have no doubt, rural communities are passionate about their sports, Hurling, football, soccer, rugby, hare coursing, greyhounds are all part of what rural people are and who they are. It's in their DNA. And why they freely choose to do so, it's simply the country way of life. It also provides hundreds of jobs through trainers, vets, animal feeds, kennel bills, tourism. Regarding animal welfare issues, this motion calls for the relevant departments in the Executive and their Oireachtas to establish a commission of experts, including but not limited to shareholders from animal welfare and rural pursuits organisations, to examine and recommend appropriate regulations. This is where we must and should be on this very important and sensitive issue. Any other outcome would see as Sinn Féin attacking rural Ireland, and this will come back to bite all our rural candidates in the next local elections. The last thing any of us want is to drive these pursuits on the ground. There will be no animal welfare whatsoever. An outright ban on hunting and hare coursing would do just that. Comrades, as I'm asking you to support the rights of rural Ireland, I'm asking you now to support the rights of rural Ireland and rural ways. Support motion 62. Gorda Mahagut and Fodbach Debu.
Sinn Féin Senator Lynn Boylan and representing Devlin, Plunkett, Cumann, and speaking against motion 62 and in favour of motions 63, 65, 67 and 68. I'm here tonight to say there is nothing inherently rural about hare coursing. Those who participate in coursing are as likely to be from cities and towns as the countryside. In fact, to label the practice of hare coursing as a rural occupation and that any attempt to ban the practice as just city dwellers attacking a rural way of life is deeply insulting to rural Ireland. It is saying that rural Ireland is a homogenous group of people who get their kicks out of watching a defenceless hare run for its life. I lived in rural Ireland for almost 10 years. Not one neighbour, work colleague or friend supported hare coursing. Many of them hunted, though, because they could see the distinction between hunting for food and the difference between chasing a defenceless animal for sport. This is also backed up by the Red C poll in 2019 that found 77% of people wanted coursing banned in this country. However, what is intrinsically Irish and traditional to rural Ireland is the Irish hare. The Irish hare is a distinct subspecies to Ireland, an animal steeped in Irish folklore and Irish mythology and protected under the Wildlife Act. It certainly does not deserve to be chased by animals that can be up to 10 times its weight. Don't forget, the hare does not know that the dog is muzzled. Hare coursing also contributes to the overbreeding of sighthounds in this country. Shelters are crying out with sighthounds that they can't rehome, many of them spending years in kennels waiting to be rehomed. And then regarding motion 67 on fox hunting with horses and hounds, this is a relic of our colonised past, a past that was of the time of the landed gentry that has no place on this island. So I encourage you vote against motion 62 in favour of 63, 65, 67 and 68.
Michael O'Reilly, Ruth Hackett, Cumann, Maynooth. Accordia, I am speaking against motion 62 and for motion 68, calling for a ban on live hare coursing now. I have some experience of country pursuits, coming from Maynooth at a time when it was still a small rural village in Kildare. As a 9 or 10-year-old child, I was brought along to help in driven shoots in Carton Estate, near where I lived. Basically, us working-class peasants were sent into the woods to make lots of noise and raise the pheasants to fly out in front of a line of well-heeled gentry folk. They would then blast them out of the sky with custom-built shotguns, each one of which was worth more than the house I lived in. And I had no problem with that. We got a welcome few bob for our services and usually a few birds for the table as well. Nowadays, in fact, I've got my own hunting and gun licences. I have had for years. I'm not here to speak against hunting per se. It's important we do not conflate the issues here tonight. But then I was brought along to my first coursing meeting as a 10-year-old. All went well until the first hare was caught by the hounds. I had never heard a sound like that in my young life. I had no idea a small animal could make such a sound. It was horrific. Once heard, never forgotten. 10-year-old me was sick to my stomach. Now, the coursing lobby will say that doesn't happen anymore, that the dogs are muzzled these days. Well, referring to muzzling as a progressive measure is simply making a virtue out of a necessity. There would be no legal coursing today if the dogs were not muzzled. Simple as. And don't forget, the hare does not know that the dog is muzzled. Now, Accordia, I'm acutely aware, as everyone in this room is, there are far worse things happening in this world as we speak. At times like these, fighting for animal rights may seem to be a luxury, a first world problem, trivial even, perhaps so. My answer to that is this: there is no wrong time to do the right thing. I therefore ask you to vote against motion 62 and for motion 68.
Smisha Reada Cronin TD, Ruth Hackett Cumann Maynooth. Accordia Sinn Fein, Tá mé leabhart an ocht in ai an ruin Ard Comhairle, iver Shaska do, agus a bhábhar ruin Shaska Seachta. I'm speaking against the Ard Comhairle motion 62 and in favour of motion 67, calling an outright ban on fox hunting with horses and hounds, and that is specific to fox hunting with horses and hounds. Of course we should regulate hunting, and we do need to protect livestock and biodiversity. I have no problem with that, but I'm calling for a ban on blood sports. We shouldn't be regulating that. And that has nothing to do with, would have no effect on a farmer having to kill a fox, because I don't believe that outright bans driving brutality underground has any basis in fact. And the Ard Comhairle would not consider legalising and regulating dog fighting or cockfighting for a moment. To even say so is absurd, yet both activities were once commonplace. I believe there is something profoundly wrong to chase a defenceless animal to exhaustion and then have it ripped apart by dogs, and to call that a sport. It is not a sport, it is savagery. It is savagery that not only terrorises and kills a beautiful, sensitive, highly intelligent canine, but also brutalises and demeans the society that allows it. The fox, an Sionnach, an Modern Rua, is a part of our national psyche. He is part of our culture. It is beyond belief that we would even consider terrorising and eviscerating this beautiful creature for sport. Fox hunting with foxes and with horses and hounds is a barbaric remnant of an alien aristocracy, an odious legacy of our colonial past, a throwback to empire, a bunch of hooray Henrys marauding around the countryside, the unspeakable in full pursuit of the uneatable. Banning it cannot drive it underground. It is the cruel impulse to terrorise animals that should be banned underground and regulated, not the act itself. I'm calling for support for motion 67 and against motion 62. Against motion 62. Gurmila Mahagav Corla.
David Jones, local election candidate in Kinnegad LEA, Westmeath, Dermot, Cumann Cllr. Welcome all to Westmeath today. I just want to support motion 62. I want to commend the Ard Comhairle for bringing this motion forward, for putting much time, effort and conversation into this motion. By proposing an outright ban, the authors of the motion fail to recognise the positive impact that rural sports have on the lives and individuals and communities. These sports promote physical fitness, mental well-being and social cohesion. Instead of hastily proposing bans, we should focus on fostering a dialogue and understanding between rural and urban communities, such as stated in the motion by the Ard Comhairle. A more sensible approach than calling for an outright ban should be recognised as dialogue as best practice. To date, Sinn Féin need to get stronger on their stance with dialogue with all involved. We have brought proper authorities to Sinn Féin, and we have waited for emails back in response. We should create this dialogue and make it meaningful. I just want to again say please support motion 62. Coming into local and general elections is expected to win 400 seats in the local elections. This won't happen if we don't support motion 62.
Dermot McEnroe, Keenan Dermot, Cumann, Delvin, Westmeath. We believe an outright ban on hare coursing would have a negative effect on local candidates in the upcoming local elections. If hare coursing is banned, it will force the sport to go underground and will be unregulated and cause unnecessary cruelty to both dog and hare. Also, fox hunting, if it's banned, will see the same fate. From someone who works in wildlife management, I can tell you that the fox population is a huge problem, both rurally and in an urban. As we come close to the local elections, the last thing a farmer wants to hear is that we support a ban on fox hunting. Sorry, no. Yeah, that's it. I urge you to support motion 62, 64 and 66. Cllr.
Díomh óna fin ó Cumann Mairéad Farrell in Gaillimh agus an géadúir síos bháilm taú go thomlá leis an bhfear sin agus an muintear Connemara tá sin tiltte acu tacaigí le rún ibre seachtú. I'm not here to speak about that. I'm here to speak about rún ibre seascadó and hare coursing. I just think it's intriguing that we've heard here today people saying that people aren't giving good enough regard to the value that terrorising animals has to certain communities. I don't think that's good enough. I think quite honestly, if we look at the wording of motion 62, and I respect the fact that there's been a lot of discussion on that, but the idea that outright bans would drive these practices underground, it's very difficult to organise a fox hunt underground. And I think it's important that our motions are not worded in such a way. And we can talk about commissions of experts until the cows come home, or rather until the foxes and the hares do not come home. But that's not good enough either. I come from a city that produced a man called Richard Martin, better known as Humanity Dick. 200 years ago, he stood strongly and managed to achieve the first legislation to protect animal rights and against animal cruelty. And I think it's high time that I'm sure there have been loads of commissions of experts in the last 200 years, but we as an Ardèche and Sinn Féin, if any party is going to stand up against colonial practices, against barbarism against animals, surely it has to be Sinn Féin. And that's why I'm calling on you to reject motion 62, because if you don't reject motion 62, we'll never get to talk about the other, or we'll never get to vote on the other motions. And I particularly want to highlight motion 63, motion 65, motion 67, motion 68 and motion 69. We need to support those. 69 in particular because that calls on Sinn Féin to have an animal welfare policy. And I think 200 years after Richard Martin, it's about time we had. Gura míle maith.
Díomh Accorda, Smisha Daire Ní Cumann McLaughlin Cahill B'Néidir Bla Clia, speaking against Ard Comhairle motion 62 and in favour of motion 63, 65 and 68. I'm asking that this Ardèche votes in favour of banning the barbaric practice of hare coursing. Just think about the hare. I mean, the Celts admired the Irish hare for its strength, its speed. The hare was regarded as a magical creature, a mystical creature, connected to the other world, and it was treated with caution and respect. Fast forward to how we're treating the hare today. Approximately 5,000 wild hares captured every year for the purpose of hare coursing, to be chased down by greyhounds, much larger, heavier animals. Think of the hare. Think of the absolute terror it must experience. Think of the suffering as it gets injured, possibly, maybe killed, maybe dies because of the stress it's experiencing. And this, not for survival, not for food, but for entertainment. Seriously? That the hares are made to suffer in this way for the sake of so-called entertainment, that such a barbaric practice is still legally permitted here, one of the last places in the world that it is to our shame as a nation. Now, the Ard Comhairle motion is opposing the ban on the basis that banning it would drive it underground. I'm sorry, I don't think that's a good enough excuse. How many good changes would have been prevented if we went on that rationale? I'm sorry, you ban and then you do your damnedest to enforce the ban. So lever dalla cordia, I'm asking you, please vote against motion 62 and in favour of motions 63, 65, 67 and 68. Gur míle maith agaibh.
Brendan Cllr, Sean Tracy Cumann Roscrea, a carja Tommy kind or son Rune, Shaska Do, Shaska Cahar, Shaska Shock, agus an I Rune, Shaska Tree, Shaska Cúig, Shaska Shock, or Shaskog. Country sports such as hunting, fishing, horse and greyhound racing and coursing have been a part of rural life since ancient time in Ireland, despite what some speakers have previously said. They are mentioned in our oldest legends. They were practiced by Cumann and Daine. They are part of our living culture, a source of recreation and community for many of us that have been passed down to us by our parents and our grandparents. To dismiss this as a colonial practice is an insult to generations of Irish men and women, including Irish Republicans, who have taken part in these pursuits. I urge you to listen to the rural voices here today. We have had many urban speakers calling for a ban. I would urge you to listen to the rural voices whose community members are the ones involved in these pursuits. Sinn Féin as a party should pride itself on listening to ordinary people when developing its policy. I would like to commend the Ard Comhairle for its extensive engagement with rural members around these issues. And I would ask people to look at the facts and avoid emotive language when discussing issues such as coursing. It is a well-regulated sport with sufficient safety procedures. Few, if any, of the hares used are killed. It is no different to a hare avoiding a predator as it would in the ordinary course of its life. They are released afterwards and go on to live their lives in the wild. It is rural land where the practitioners of these sports live. That is a fact. It cannot be denied. It is rural fishermen and hunters who play a vital role in the conservation work that benefits our native biodiversity. It is those involved in greyhound and horse breeding who have led the way in improving animal welfare standards in Ireland. Whenever policy discussion on these issues come up, it is important that rural people are those who are listened to and not spoken over by well-meaning but uninformed urban comrades. I would encourage you all to support the Ard Comhairle motion. Gur míle maith agaibh.
Martin Brown, Choctadala for Tipperary, the Pierce McCann Cumann. And I want to speak on 62, 64 and 66, and I fully back this motion. I'm from a rural constituency where rural occupations such as hunting and hare coursing have a very strong base. Now, I understand that coursing is a contentious issue, comrades, and I support people in expressing these concerns, because if they were not expressed, we would not have seen the improvements that have been made over the last number of years. Welfare standards have improved considerably. Licences are issued to the ICC with the mandatory requirement that numerous conditions, welfare standards and practices are adhered to. Regional staff of the National Parks and Wildlife Service and the Department of Agriculture attend many coursing meetings to monitor adherence of regulations and the conditions which were set down. This, alongside the presence of veterinary staff, provide increasing certainty that standards are kept. Given the deep-set interest in coursing that has been acquired for some over generations, I would be concerned that if an outright ban were to happen, it would have a negative consequence for welfare by increasing the likelihood that someone would choose to hold illegal events, which by their very nature would be unregulated and unmonitored. Instead, I am of the belief that instead of an outright ban, we should continue to annualise regulations, strengthen them if where needed, and also promote alternatives such as the motion suggests, drag hunting and lure coursing. And I say well done to Ard Comhairle for the countrywide engagement that took place, and that this motion has come from that and them discussions with our members. And let's listen to what our grassroots members have said from that discussion. That's where this motion has come from. Indeed, there is a strong argument that to incentivise this, and that would be my preferred way of going forward. To move this forward, we need to engage with the welfare organisations and those involved in rural pursuits. to map this progression to continuously improve welfare, avoid unregulated practices and to provide evolving alternatives. So I am very much in favour of this motion, and I appeal to members to see the rationality behind this. As we go into election mode, comrades, we do not want to be divided. We do not want a narrative going away from here that it's rural versus urban. So motion 32 strikes a good balance between that, and I ask for support for motion 62.
Is Misha Yolanda Mollahan, Michael Moore and Cumann speaking on motion 69. There are currently 3,227 dogs in pounds and rescue centres across Ireland, with more on waiting lists waiting to be surrendered. The rescues, many of whom are voluntary, are at breaking point. The culture of buying a dog or a pet needs to be replaced by a culture of adoption. The excuse of it takes too long to adopt a pet isn't acceptable. Rescues have to be sure that an animal is going to a suitable home. That's why home checks are carried out. Also, if a pet doesn't work out, a rescue centre will help you. For an adoption fee of between €150 to €250, your pet is vaccinated, wormed, microchipped, vaccinated against bought pets that are barely vaccinated for fees of up to €3,000. Neutering of all pets is best practice to avoid unwanted pups, kittens and foals. Engagement with rescue centres is key to finding solutions to the animal welfare issues we are seeing, and of course enforcement of current laws. Animal ownership, from a bunny rabbit to a horse, is a big responsibility and not a right. We must remember that the greatness of any nation and its moral progress can be judged by the way its animals are treated. Dermot.
Sean Caintor, Dermot, Solain.
Eoghan, it's Miss Alyssa Ní Bhroin, Mary Cumann and a local action candidate for Cllr. I am speaking against motion 62 and in favour of motion 63, 65 and 68. Despite some proponents arguing that it is not cruel, the practice of hare coursing has been subject to rigorous scrutiny and evidence that points to the undeniable suffering of these frail creatures. The introduction of muzzles in 1993 might have mitigated direct fatalities caused by biting, but has not eradicated the suffering of these animals. Hares, even if not bitten, are buffeted and stressed by the much larger dogs involved in coursing. This stress is highlighted by reports and veterinary examinations leads to the potential for capsular myopathy and other injuries that can prove fatal. The contention that injured, pregnant or ill hares are not allowed to run may be presented, but it is vital to acknowledge the lingering concerns highlighted by reports from reputable sources. The official Countryside Rangers report at a specific coursing club meeting in Wexfprd in 2003 noticed an exceptionally high number of 40 hare deaths at the event. Furthermore, veterinary reports attributed these deaths to significant stress induced by the coursing process. The British National Coursing Club's evidence to the Barron's inquiry suggested that muzzle coursing, if not managed properly, could lead to more suffering and than unmuzzled coursing. Even enclosed coursing, intended to minimise risks, has been depicted in video evidence by organisations such as the Irish Council Against Bloodsports, showing instances where injured hares were not promptly attended to, exasperating their distress and suffering. I want to dispel the notion that hare coursing is a key part of country life. I am native to County Wexford. It was never a part of my daily life or those of my neighbours and community. It needs to be called out for what it is, a barbaric and cruel practice. It has been banned in the North since 2003. It's about time that it's banned in the 26 counties, and I want Sinn Fein to lead that change. Gurb Míle Maith.
Okay, we're going to move towards a vote on this, and again, can I thank all the speakers for being brief and focusing clearly on the motions on the Cllr. So, Gurb Míle Maith and Cllr. So we're going to move now to the vote. Can I ask the delegates to take their cards from around your
that's
neck?
the end of our final section for first night of Sinn Fein Ard Fheis 2023 in Athlone. For any of you watching in, I'm sure you'll agree that was a really interesting section, really passionate debates across a number of issues, regional development, animal welfare, so on and so forth. And I suppose this is democracy in action. And as you'll see, there's strong views from members on either side of certain topics. And again, we're now going to go through the motions in terms of voting for and against, setting our party policy and direction for the year ahead. And we're approaching the close, I suppose, of the first day of this Ardesh, and we'll return tomorrow with live coverage from 10 a.m, kicking off with debates and sections on climate action and energy security, and planning for Irish unity. We'll have a live section which will be carried on RTE between 12 and 1 o'clock, and then we'll have debates on health and housing.